Welcome, first lecture, sample lecture, using Adobe Connect Pro for the purposes of traditional lecture. This short slideshow is being used to show a sample of how a presentation tool, such as PowerPoint or Keynote, can be used with a narrative to perform or deliver a lecture. In this case, I'm using a presentation tool like PowerPoint, only it's called Keynote on the Mac, and I'm able to record my voice over the slides, which can then be put into Blackboard or some other online environment. So using ACP for the purposes of lecture. I guess one of the first things that comes to mind is just the purpose and goal of the lecture. Is it to be captured and recorded and then be made available for the students to view at any time during the week or at their convenience? Then you'd be creating an asynchronous event where you would record and capture your thoughts and your slides, make it available so students can then go look at that or listen to that recording. The other option obviously is like a traditional lecture. You could all meet online in real time, synchronously, to engage with the content, to deliver a presentation, and of course to consider some engagement, discussion, or questions. So whether or not you want to capture an Adobe Connect Pro recording, I guess depends on whether you want it to be a live event or a captured recording. When you're creating lecture materials, unlike maybe a lecture which could go for an entire class period, it's advisable to kind of break it into a few pieces, smaller chunks. It's a little bit more digestible online when there are logical breaks in a lecture or a recording. Having to sit in front of the computer solid straight for 50 minutes is a long time. And the other thing is, assuming you can stop the recording, the students certainly can do that. But I think it's best to maybe consider at least taking a longer lecture and breaking it up to 2 or 3 smaller parts. What that also does, it gives you the opportunity to intervene after those segments to maybe pose a question, potentially have an activity that needs to be performed before you listen to the rest of the lecture. So again, make it digestible because it is online. You also want to consider before lecturing into an Adobe Connect Pro environment what level of interaction you want from your students. Are they expected to just listen? Are they expected to post questions? Maybe use a chat tool? So just making sure that the level of engagement is clearly defined for students is very helpful before beginning a live recording or even a live session or a recording in Adobe Connect Pro. The other thing that's good to do is to tie some activity around a recorded lecture so that the students either before the lecture have some pre-thought to the topic or maybe after the lecture have some activity or some assessment they need to perform, tying themselves back to the material and hopefully encouraging their engagement as well as making sure that they're comprehending and engaged with the lecture material. Graphics are really useful. A lot of text-heavy PowerPoints do not draw a lot of attention. Trying to consider using graphics, in this case the one shows you here if the retention rate is a little higher if you're doing something other than just pure lecture. And of course in an online environment we just spoke of having some kind of activities or other things that students can do online that will draw them into the material other than listening to, say, a recorded lecture such as this. Reading material, audio-visual such as these graphics, demonstrating their knowledge, all helps their retention rate. So using graphics is another way to make it a little bit more engaging when you're doing a lecture. Using images rather than a lot of text to make your point is good for different styles of learners, and again it makes it for a lighter and not so text heavy of a presentation. And you can see here I have a roller coaster, and you know what, this doesn't have to be hard. Learning to teach online doesn't have to be something that is for the adventurous, but rather something for folks who are prepared. And preparation is the other comment. Using ACP for lecture really means practicing ahead of time, preparing your lecture. You may be able to speak to a live group rather naturally, but when you get into a new environment, there's usually a little bit of learning that has to go on. And Adobe Connect Pro, like many technologies, does require, or I guess I could say that you need to prepare if you'd like to have an effective presentation until you become so skilled that it becomes second nature. The other thing is practice. Not only prepare, but be prepared for having to do things maybe more than once, again, until you are totally familiar with the technology. And that's the case of really any technology. To become effective, you really need to use it, practice it, and become skilled at that technology, and become just familiar with it. The other thing that's very important is to make sure you take advantage of any support options you have during that practice time. There are tons of people on campus willing to assist any instructor who would like to investigate into new technologies in an online environment. Benefits of ACP, well, the recording has been mentioned, that you can edit, you can add to, and you can review any recording. So you can capture a lot and reuse a lot of your material. That's one benefit. As I mentioned before, it can be used in real time with a live group of students, or it can just be recorded to then deliver at the convenience of the students. So it is really an accessible tool, and it's a very useful tool that both students can use and instructor, and it's yet another thing that once learned is a way to expand your own resume of skills. Challenges of ACP are obvious, I guess, to this point. Just the learning curve to learn a new technology. It also can, from time to time, like any technology, be imperfect. You will have to address any student concerns about the technology. Again, we have support for students as well. And the other thing that's maybe a challenge to any technology, such as Adobe Connect Pro, is doing it over and over and never changing it and becoming redundant. And that's just one of those challenges that we all have, to make sure that we're utilizing technology in different ways and not in repetitive ways, to the point where our students know that it's going to be the same old thing. Bottom line is, the instructor will always be the most critical factor in the adoption of any technology or any learning in any classroom, whether it be physical or virtual. So the instructor is the key factor in online environments, and the engagement in learning definitely can be very effective and rewarding once some of the pre-mentioned risks and challenges are addressed and instructors are prepared. It can be certainly a effective way to reach a number of students in a number of ways.